Good morning, everyone. In this video, we're going to talk about the modernization attempts by the Nanjing government during the Nanjing decade from 1927 to 1937. Firstly, we're going to talk about the rationale of their reformation or modernization. Even though at this stage Sun Yat-sen already died, but still his achievements and his idea still very important lead to the modernization of Nanjing government. When we talk about achievements of Sun Yat-sen, actually, or I mentioned, compared to other leaders, his most important achievement was his ideas. So what kind of idea has led to the reformation of Nanjing government? Firstly, the political aspect. Actually, according to Sun Yat-sen, the formation of a country should follow a three phases stage, namely military rule, political tutelage, and constitutional government. Just like this, firstly, they should have a military government, which both soldiers and civilians would be ruled by military law. So people, they will learn about all those laws and learn how to take orders. So after 3 years of military government, they should change into a political tutelage. That is a time when regulation will be formulated and people, they could have some extent of freedom. They could elect regional councillors and executive officials. It's like while people, they have learned how to take the order and they were well informed, then they should have the ability to join in the political life of the country. And after this, they will have the constitutional government, just like what we mentioned about the constitutional reform of a country about democracy. So a constitution would be enacted. That means they will have, for example, universal suffrage. They were going to have more freedom because people, they are well trained because of those military rule and political tutelage stage. Actually, these three steps was reflecting what we learned at the last few classes about Sun Yat-sen's drafts of Three People's Principle. For example, nationalism or national consciousness, which focus on restore Chinese rule, right? So it was reflecting the military part. The military rule is a time when they should build a military government, and firstly they should confirm the unity of the country. They should be independent, right? And then democracy and socialism were both included in the political tutelage and constitutional government. Especially for the democracy, here, for example, he mentioned that the government should divide it into 5 powers, including executive, legislative, judicial, examination, and control. Actually, these 5 powers was formed in under the Nanjing government. We're going to review this part later. And then about to equalize land ownership is more of a constitutional age thing, to equalize the things, a little like socialism or communism, right? And land ownership should be equalized. So they think after the success of Northern Expedition, actually they already complete the first stage of revolution. That means they think they already able to gain the independence of the country. That is the reason why they should start it or prepare to go on to the next stage, which is the political tutelage. So in 1928, the Kuomintang passed an outline of a political tutelage. For example, according to the outline of political tutelage, the National People's Congress of the Kuomintang would lead people in exercising political power. It's because the second stage, people, they still need a party, they still need a Congress to represent them to make decisions, right? Secondly, at the closing of the National People's Congress of the Kuomintang, political power will be given to the Central Executive Committee, because the National People's Congress, they were not able to have meetings and make decisions because there were people around the country, right? They were not able to joining the decision making every day. That is the reason why when they were not really function or closing, the power will be given to the Central Executive Committee to help them to make decision and represent the Congress to make decision. Last but not the least, The Kuomintang would train its people on the rights of election, we call initiative and referendum. That means they are preparing their people for the last stage. Secondly, you can see the second political aspect is the division of government power. This is what I said, that how three people's principle reflecting what they did under Nanjing government, the 5 yuan. Legislative, judicial, executive, examination, and control yuan. So all these yuan have its own function. You have to, actually I think it's easy for you to remember the first 3 ones, so legislative, judicial, and executive. But you have to also understand what does it mean by examination yuan. It's a time when you try to be a part of the civil service, right? You want to join the government, so you need to take exams under the examination yuan to join the government. And then control yuan. This is another organization which was to monitoring government's operations, to supervise their operations. So this is a photo. The president and the leader of 5 yuan took an oath to be in the office. And next, so for political aspect, we talk about 2 parts. First part is they confirm that it's their second stage of political tutelage, and the second part is they will divide the power into 5 divisions, 5 yuan, right? And next, economic aspect, the development of industries. Even though you have already read this part, but still I think it's a very good thing to review the wording they were using in this part. For example, when it mentioned the light industry, it said that there was certain progress in light industry. But when it used to describe the heavy industry, it used to the obvious one. So there was obvious growth in heavy industries such as coal, iron, and steel. So from these 2 sentences, what do you think comparatively is more important to Nanjing government? Of course, should be the heavy industry, right? But because for the light industry only mentioned a certain progress, a certain degree, right? But for heavy industry, it's like an obvious growth. So actually you can learn from these 2 terms and wording they were using in these 2 sentences and make use of them in your answers. And also you can see there's some capitalist aspect of their policy, because the government, they encourage people to set up their own business. For example, this is the first industrial region established in Guangdong province in 1934. My question is, why the first industrial region should be in Guangdong, not elsewhere? Of course, it's because Guangdong is next to the sea, right? So it's good for trading port. But more importantly, Guangdong is close to Hong Kong, right? Because at that time, Hong Kong was still under the colonial rule of Britain. Under their rule, Hong Kong became a free port and developed entry port trade. And related industries and service was subsequently developed. It means at that time, by using Hong Kong's advantage, actually can help mainland to develop our own industries. And of course, other infrastructure construction. So next part of economic aspect is the improvement of communication. We always talk about communication is important for the economic development. That is the reason why when they try to build any industries, when they try to build any important economic use region, locations can be important, because locations is also greatly relevant to the transportation, right? So the improvement of communication can also important for the economic development and modernization. When we talk about communication, of course, the transportation in the air, at sea, and on land, right? So on land we have the road. So the road network was developed. The Ministry of Railway was established, directing the improvement of existing lines and the construction of new lines. That means people, they were freely go to a lot of places by taking these new lines. And then the ferry system, that means in the sea, right? At Nanjing was developed, and modern airlines, that means in the air, up high in the sky, were initiated. That means different kinds of communications were strengthened. For example, the Tianjin Airport, Eurasia Aviation Corporation first tried the fights between Beiping and Guangzhou. Actually, at that time, people will name Beijing as Beiping because since Nanjing is the capital, so they changed the name Beijing to Beiping since it's no longer the capital, right? And of course, the communication between people, not only the transportation, also include different services, right? For example, the postal service and telecommunications. That's the reason why when we talk about 5G, like it can be very important these days because it's also relevant to communication, which greatly relevant to the economic development. So the postal services, the telecommunications were greatly improved, which are important for the business. For example, this is a postal agency central broadcasting system launched after expansion in 1932. And last but not the least, for economic aspect, is the reform of currency. They had the substitution of silver dollar for the tael in 1933. The reason why this is important is at the old time when you do business with others, you use silver dollar, which is like very heavy, right? But now with banking system, you can use the paper money, which is like lighter and easier for you to carry from one place to another and will relieve your burden of doing business with any other people. For example, all these things, the legal tender for 4 banks. I mean, these 4 banks, they have the power to print out the money. Next, military aspect, strengthening military force, of course, with the help of Germany. I think you have already read this part from a book I provided. China built up a strong and modern army. Air Force, Navy were developed, purchase of advanced military equipment, for us, right? Advanced for us, but maybe not that advanced for other countries. Next, the diplomatic aspect. This can be the most important achievements for the Nanjing government because compared to other reformation or other attempts of modernization, the most important difference is at this stage we were able to regaining a part of the foreign concessions and leased territories finally. Because for other reformation, for example, the late Qing reform and also other movements, we were not able to really gain such high level of independence. For example, British agreed to return China their concessions at different places, and the Belgian concession at Tianjin was recovered. The unequal treaty imposed on China by foreign powers were abolished in 1943. So I think this can be the most important achievements for the Nanjing government, especially when you try to make comparisons between all the movements and attempts of modernization we've learned in this chapter. Next, the regaining, because we're getting more independence, right? And also a lot of like unequal treaty, they were abolished. This is the reason why we can regain our tariff autonomy. From 1928 onwards, the Nanjing government signed new agreements with foreign power to replace expired treaties and agreements. We finally regain our control on customs, which is like good for our economic development in return. And then under the same reason, abolishing extraterritorial rights. So my question is, on what aspect did the abolishment of extraterritorial rights lead China to political modernization? This is because under extraterritorial rights, the foreigners or the foreign merchants, they have a lot of privilege in China to do business and to live, right? When we abolish these unequal rights or unequal privilege of these foreigners, actually it can help us to have a more equal environment for us to do business. And equality, of course, is a very important aspect of political modernization. So this is how abolishing extraterritorial rights can help us to achieve certain level of political modernization. Next, social and educational aspect. different levels of education were enhanced. How to enhance? By reorganizing the universities, colleges, and providing subsidies to private institutions of higher education, to immense growth in primary, secondary, and technical schools, and free education was provided. So you can see the wording they were using here, the enhancement of education by reorganizing growth, that means more schools, and free education. Why? The reason why I highlight this is to help you to remember these points. And then the launch of New Life movements. This is a very important achievement made by Song Meiling, right? So according to the New Life movement, they were promoting a spiritual awakening among the Chinese. That means we're not only seeking the development of the economy, we're also seeking the awakening of our spirit life. So it was based on some traditional virtues of politeness, righteousness, integrity, and self-respect. Then actually these virtues can be like very important for everyone, even nowadays. It stressed qualities such as bravery, promptness, tidiness, cleanliness, simplicity, and plainness. Because when we talk about traditional virtues, there are different virtues, right? But why these but not others can be like more important in this kind of New Life movement? For example, here, this is like a news report. And also they have different advisement, the propaganda of the New Life movement. So after we talk about all these movements or all these different policies and new things and attempts of their modernization, it's important for us to review all these modernization, right? So these are the achievements. You can read it on your notes. You can read it yourself. And these are the limitations. The homework for this part is to let you do one thing. That is, because we have learned different aspects, different policies, right? And here we have different achievements and limitations. I need you to, for example, it said the first achievement, it brought an end to the warlord chaos and established a relatively stable regime. So for this one, I would like you to tell what did Nanjing government do to achieve this. Okay, so for each of the achievements, you need to list out. For example, here I already give you one example: the success of Northern Expedition, or it defined rights and responsibility of the government, so it will relevant to the outline of political tutelage, right? So for each of these bullet points, you need to list out what did the Nanjing government do, try to achieve this. And also you need to do the same thing for the limitation. So what they do all those things, what didn't they do, or what did they do wrong to cause these limitations? The reason why I need you to do this is for the DSE and the DBQ, actually, they always provide you a source. The source may be relevant to some of those policies. Maybe it will be about the time when they have the New Life movement, right? So after you mention this movement, more importantly, you need to talk about the limitation and achievements. But all the times, it will ask you to select some of these achievements and some of those limitation instead of list all them out. So you need to see and need to know the relationship between the achievements points, the limitation points with all those policies. You need to be selective and you need to be able to choose different points to support your answers in the database questions. This is the reason why you need to do this work. So this is the end of the class. See you next time.